Okay, now we've got Congressman Dave Schweikert. Dave is the chair of the Joint Economic Committee in the House of Representatives. Of course, he's a congressman from Arizona. Dave, come on up. Oh, he's going to go. Are you on her board? You're probably on her board.
No, please understand, I consider her an optimist.
Okay. Great. Dave, I hear rumors you're running for governor.
Yeah. It's I can't fix D.C., so maybe
you're going to go do Arizona? Well, Dave, it's great to see you. I always love my conversation. We've been a crowd here. We're going to give marathon medals, at the end of this next year, because I didn't think of it in advance, for this long day of these fireside chats, different slices of life and perspective about what it takes to get American growth in the right spot. And you and I have talked about this before. I'm very grateful for your time. And
understand, I'm here because you're one of the few people I actually like.
Oh, thank you.
And before we get going, we're going to pass around a notebook please, if I owe you an apology after the end of this, please do a check mark. I handwrite my apology notes because I promise you before we finish here, I will hurt someone's feelings.
That's okay. I've had so many people hurt other people's feelings already.
Well, I've seen you do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dave, thank you. So we were just having this great talk with Maya about the building blocks of the economy. We've been talking about debt, trade, investment, AI. As you're going out to sort of to go to a new terrain, and I also think in your role, you folks, if you don't know the Joint Economic Committee, it's kind of the think tank that thinks through, to some degree, the theoretical dimensions and the dimensions of how to get an economy right. And what I loved when I was in the Senate years ago, and my senator was a member of the Joint, you had Connie Mack, I think, was the chairman of that, and we had we were reminded what Hamilton wrote about, what Friedrich List wrote about, what Adam Smith, various people out there about this, and there was a real debate. But I'm interested in your frame as chairman of the committee, now running for governor of Arizona. What are the equities in the American economy we're screwing up?
Yes.
All of it.
Somehow I thought that was going to be funnier. And look, I've taken the Joint Economic Committee, and it's one of my great joys is to chair. I think I now have one just defended, I think. So I may have as many as 6 PhD economists. I may have more PhD economists in the White House right now. I actually believe our single biggest thing we're not doing well is we're not telling the truth. We're not. So if I came to you or Maya or the other freaky smart people, you wouldn't be in this room if you're not part of sort of the aristocracy of intellect. What's the driver of U.S. sovereign debt? Interest and healthcare. How many of you have an association with a tech company? Okay, say at least someone was bold enough to sort of.
They're lurking out there.
The fact of the matter is, where the hell are you? And one of my intense angers is, we know we have the technology where we could crash the price of healthcare. A legalized technology. I did an experiment. I'm wearing the Oura Ring, but last week I was doing an experiment with the Dexcom. I'm functionally wearing a medical lab on my body. We've had pieces of legislation saying, hey, if the FDA approves it, we can show it's statistically viable. The technology can prescribe. You would think every tech company in the world would be in our office saying, let's legalize technology. It would give us, we're spending all this freaking money in AI and these data sets, but the end use case in many ways is the revolution of helping our society be healthier. And by the way, healthcare is my number 2 primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt. And so we have pieces of legislation saying, hey, if FDA approves AI can prescribe, and I can't get a single tech company to come in and advocate for it. Because it's almost like they're terrified to show up and be seen taking on establishment. And you run into, it's the Watson problem.
Yeah.
What happens when you're going to create AI diagnostics, but hospitals are your customer? And your technology here puts your customer out of business. But we're going through the revolution. If you'd help me bring it faster.
So what is in the way? Because one of the I asked Eric Schmidt when he was CEO of Google, what was probably 12 years ago, what was going to make Americans fall in love in AI? And he said maybe fraud protection, et cetera. And I don't know if he's right on that. But the second thing he said, health diagnostics are terrible. and it's going to revolutionize health diagnostics. And so it's already doing that.
So
you're already seeing that. So why isn't it crashing?
Okay, I don't like the frame of your question, so let's have some fun here.
Okay, go ahead.
How many of you actually know how this works? No. Well, how many of you have ever taken one apart and are fascinated with the encryption chip? Of course not. You're not a super nerd. But you use it all day long. You're walking around with a supercomputer. You don't need to be in love with AI. You need to be in love with what it provides you.
Well, that's what he said. The health.
And so sell the benefits. Don't sell the technology. I have a weird degree of expertise in distributive networks. So, years ago, I helped on a latency paper on nodes and those things. So this is even sort of pre people figuring out what blockchain was. And I would do these whiteboard seminars and realize I turn around and the entire room disappeared. No one cared. They just wanted to know what were the benefits of a distributive ledger in protecting your privacy, in confirmation of data. It's a long ways of saying, help us sell the benefits to society. I have a 3-year-old that we've adopted, and a wife exactly my age, and a 10-year-old, because we're insane. Are pathologically
optimistic. You're going to be working a long time, Dave.
Yeah. Greatest thing that ever happened to us, but little boy's been sick. Tried to get a pediatric appointment. So why couldn't I have put the thing on his wrist, or the thing the saliva, the thing you urinate in, the breath biopsy you blow in, the things that could be in your medicine cabinet today, and say, okay, here's what he needs. That technology exists today, but we're going to have the revolution of changing state licensures, what we in the federal government are both permit but also reimburse. If people like me are freaked out over the debt cycle, United States, we now estimate in the Joint Economic Committee, Republicans, that the United States will have 0 population growth this year. I need you to think about what that means in long-run economic vitality. So are we going to legalize the technology that allows us to have the productivity curve so we can raise wages? One of the great stresses in our society is so much of our population is poorer today when you do their actual purchasing power than they were a few years ago. Help us raise wages, but you do that through productivity. And many of you are sitting on technology that could help us revolutionize, but you got to deal with idiots like me. You got to show up and help us do policy and legislation and mechanics to actually legalize the opportunities that your investments in technology bring. And I'm just shocked how bad tech is in taking on, saying, this is the future, and we're going to help you at least do statutes, reimbursements, mechanisms, so when we're able to get that last step, it's ready to go. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
Look, I'm sharing a personal frustration.
No, I think it's important, and I am interested in these inflection points of how we need to see things and do things differently to kind of get us into a different space that's better for more Americans. That's what this summit is about, and fresh thinking on this. I am interested in, as you think about Arizona, because this is your next pie, on whether you feel the current administration's direction on trying to rebalance the economy, with tariffs, with looking at industrialization, manufacturing, focusing on some of the worker level circumstances and jobs. Do you feel like in Arizona it's shifting in the right direction, or is it still, is the jury still out?
Yeah, and this is going to be a jerky thing to say. I try never to feel, I try to look at the math.
Right.
And that is culturally a very difficult thing for DC, because we make public policy by feelings, not by our
I like
facts.
math. I like data.
That's why did I mention you're one of the few people I like. So what happens when the arrogance of those of us who are elected, we think we know what the future is. And we often send money to this, money to that, and yet we get it wrong. So how do you design policy that the markets, that information decides where those resources go. And you're running into some classic problems. So we're going to reindustrialize, except the industrial building is going to be full of robots. And yet we never explained that, the labor substitution. You have a country right now, we have fewer 18-year-olds today than we had 20 years ago. Next year, I have fewer 18-year-olds than this year. And the year after that, I have fewer than that. At the same time, I have doubled the number of 65 and up than I had 20 years ago. Does anyone pay attention to basic demographics? So go back to your high school economics class, remember, population divided by,
Right.
is how you get your GDP. I don't think because it's hard. It's hard to get up in front of an audience of people out there who are working their hearts out, just trying to survive, trying to figure out how to make their car payment, and then explain economically, we're going to need labor substitution with AI and synthetic biology and robots. And they look at you in horror saying, but I'm just trying to make my car payment.
Right.
But yet, the fact of the matter is, the way lobbying and those things work, if it was 20 years ago, Blockbuster Video should have hired an army of lobbyists to slow down the internet to stop Netflix. Sounds sarcastic, but it's partially true. We used to embrace creative destruction in an economy and in a society. Today, we become the largest shareholder of Intel. Instead of the very things that create the next remember the word punctuated equilibrium? You go along and suddenly you have the next step up of technology. I'm a heretic. I will upset some people in here. I thought the CHIPS Act in its design, subsidizing previous generation technology, how about if a chunk of that money went into getting our qubits to dealing noise suppression so you actually had quantum? That would be a revolution. And so it's that allocation problem of how do you maintain today's politics of workers, knowing we love them, we care about them, and getting the productivity steps up so we can raise their wages.
So Jared Agan was here this morning, who's head of the executive director of the Energy Dominance Council. And he shared with us that, the U.S. government taking a stake in Intel, taking a stake in Lithium America, taking a stake, is going to be the new norm, that it communicates U.S. government resolve. But in a way, it's also picking winners and losers, right? And you're building that in. Are you uncomfortable with that?
I am stressed out of my mind on it because you have a century of economic literature that demonstrates when you have government investments in you semi-nationalize certain slivers, that the creativity, the creative destruction, the next step up to productivity is suppressed. You get rent-seeking saying, well, I need to use their technology because I'm getting a government contract and they're partially government-owned, instead of, hey, there may be this new technology on the line, let's go invest in that. It's more than just choosing winners and losers. We live in a time of miracles. When AI last year produced whole new categories of antibiotics that the literature says would have taken humans 20 years to ever think through. We're all familiar with Google Fold and those things wrapping around MNR proteins and those things. But what happens when, because government, either regulatory policy, barriers to entry, or ownership, are actually the very things that slow down the next level of creativity? But incumbents like it. And when I say incumbents, I mean incumbent business models, incumbent bureaucracies despise creative destruction. And yet, I can show you from an economist's viewpoint, if we don't have a remarkable growth of productivity, I can't cover our pension liability. We have 7 years and the Social Security Trust Fund is gone. In 7 years, we double senior poverty in America with a 24% cut. In 7 years, the Medicare Trust Fund is gone. And the hospital infrastructure in America gets an 11% cut. And the first year, 2033, that's over $630 billion if you said we're going to just reach in the general fund. So 60% of the entire defense budget would be required. To understand the scale what's coming at us because of the decision in our society and all over the industrialized world 40 years ago to fertility rates collapsing, or falling.
Really quick, we've got Ambassador Georgette Mosbacher has got a quick zinger and a quick response.
Yes.
Fire.
Congressman, I go in for a medical procedure. I fill out 22 pages of regulations that our government has placed for me to go in for a simple procedure. The procedure didn't take as long as the 22 pages I filled out. And then after I have the procedure, I have to go to follow-up doctor, and I fill out another 22 pages. Almost the same thing. We have all this technology in my phone.
Because you're special,
and
Georgette.
why is it that the cost of health care and the cost of that, this seems to be, 101, and we can't fix it?
And Ambassador, we have had legislation in my office, some of it for almost a decade, to legalize. You walk in the door, you're recognized, your data moves over, the clean claims in the back end that here's the doctor's notes, here's the insurance contract, it's an automatic pay. But it turns out that the billing company comes and beats the crap out of me in lobbying. When I was doing telehealth, and remember, when I say telehealth, I mean digital health, where it's more than just staring at someone. It's the data off your body, those things. They spent millions of dollars beating me up in Arizona because it was real estate that had invested in urgent care centers, and telehealth would stop people walking in the door. The fact of the matter is, healthcare is about money and financing. It is not about you being healthy.
1 minute, because we've got Cecilia Rouse in the wings, and I want to move on. But Dave,
more interesting.
But no, you're great. One of the most popular events I ever did was inviting Senator John Hoeven and then Senator Joe Manchin, this was about 12 years ago, to a talk on how lousy it was being a senator compared to being a governor. And enormously popular. They had both been governors, and they just didn't like. But I want to ask you now, as you're running for governor in Arizona, I'm just interested in what weather you're going to change. How are you going to change gravity as a governor? What in these issues you care so much about, can you actually move in a way that defies gravity at the federal level?
You absolutely can. And we've actually have some living examples of that in Arizona, where you design a sandbox and all of a sudden you became one of the innovation centers of America in distributed ledger. We actually have a very unique Medicaid system in Arizona. We functionally buy managed care policies for poor people. The ability to use that to help our brothers and sisters be healthier. When you're actually looking at data sets that obesity is a predominant within your Medicaid populations, what now with the crashing of the prices of glutides? What would happen if you could reduce obesity by a third, a half in your Medicaid? There's things that we have advocated for at the federal level, but I cannot either, because it challenges an incumbent's business model or bureaucracies, but you can do it at the state level. And Arizona has an amazing history of being actually pretty darn creative. And I think we're going to roll that creativity in creating a state that's, we can get the wages going up again and make people's lives and affordability a really neat place to live again.
Well, another great conversation. Congressman Dave Schweikert, Chairman of the Joint Economic Committee. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dave.
you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Bye now.
See you, my friend. Thank you.